Well, today so far I've been doing the solar installation once again. I've been up on the roof, getting the gland in there installed, getting the wires through the roof, down inside the van, and I've just done a sort of test setup. And the other thing that I've done today is get the heat-proof, not insulation, but caulking compound around all of the wood and everything where I've cut through my floor. And the exhaust goes through and it gets pretty hot down there, so I wanted to make sure I got that stuff in there. I'll show you what that stuff is in a second, and I'll show you what I've done. So I've basically taken my seat out again. This is my installation of my diesel heater, and I've put some heat proof because it gets quite hot underneath here. I could feel it was really hot the night when I was running it. So what I've done is I've put heat proof heat shield between the floor and the actual unit. This is probably overkill, but I figure it's better to, probably play it safe and do it all the right way than just do it the wrong way. As I said, you can get a gland kind of thing that goes in there, or a better unit that actually is designed to go through the floor. I'll have to find the link to those and I'll show you guys the links to those, because that would be a good thing to buy before you even start this job. But I didn't bother because I've cut quite a bit of wood out around where it actually sits through, so it's not sitting right up against the wood or anything. But it does get hot down there, so I wanted to make sure that nothing could burn. And I've sealed up around the edges of it as well, so that we just want to make sure there's no fumes getting back up here. I don't think they would, but just to be 110% sure that it's all okay. And you can see my batteries in the background, so I've got my two batteries hooked up, and I've got my Energy charge controller hooked up, which I'll show you in a minute. So underneath the van, this is what you can see. You can see how I've kind of put the ceiling stuff. That's really high temp stuff. It's a special building type heat proof, fireproof, fire retardant stuff. I'll show you the name of that in a second. So this is the stuff I use to seal the floor. It's a fire retardant stuff. And this is the gland that goes through the ceiling where the solar panels are hooked up. So I've just got the cable tied to the roof rack there, and then I've just got this going through. I've got a couple of clamps on here to just hold it on the roof while the silicone fully sets. It's not fully set yet. I mean, it takes 24 hours or something to set, so I'll just leave those clamps on there overnight, and probably tomorrow as well. I want to make sure that doesn't leak and that it's not coming off ever again. And under here we have the Energy charge controller, which I'll show you. So Bluetooth connectivity to my phone, so I can see what's going on. It's an extra unit that you put in and it plugs into it. Battery temperature monitor, which goes back to the batteries so that I can measure the temperature of what's going on in the batteries. And then the unit itself, which shows you what's actually going on with the batteries. So, at the moment we're just sort of trickle charging because the batteries were already pretty much charged anyway. So 13.5 volts in the battery, almost 13.6 kilowatt hours. You can't tell because we're not using any power at the moment. 26 degrees between the batteries currently. And where is the amperage? It'll show us that in a second. It's putting 17.2 volts out of the solar panels at the moment, and 0.9 of an amp, so it's just slowly trickle charging them right up to full power. And here we have the app. So the app tells us what's going on. 17.4 volts, 0.68 of an amp going in, charge power 12 watts, the voltage of the batteries, and they're at 100% capacity at the moment, 13.5 volts. Yeah, temperature. So pretty much this thing shows you the whole lot. It shows you what's going on. It has other info in here. I haven't spent a whole lot of time sussing this out at the moment, but you can, look at how long it's been on for and what's happened and how much power it's put into the battery and so on and so on. But the nice thing about this is it's just nice because you can be not by your van and still be connected to this, provided you're in range of the Bluetooth. So you don't have to necessarily go right up to the charge controller, check what's going on, have a look, because you can just look at your phone. So yeah, pretty happy with that setup. Really, it's pretty good. What I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do next is I've got this panel at the back here which I want to get into here, and I'm going to have to start building some boxes and things around the air heater, and I've got to get some steel and build some like something to hold the batteries down, so that if there was ever you know, any kind of high-speed action in this van, which is highly unlikely with it not being a racing van and all. But if there was, we don't want the batteries sliding around and throwing themselves all around the inside of the back of the van, so we need to get something to clamp those down. So I've got some brackets, and I need to get myself some a little bit of screwed rod and a little piece of steel to go across the top, and I'll make some sort of battery holder. And what else are we going to do? Oh yeah, I've got some holes that I need to cut into this board as well at the back, because I'm going to have a bed that pulls out, that slides underneath this other bed, so that we can sleep my oldest boy. Oh yes, and here as well. So this unit, of course, you know, the diesel heater container, that needs to be boxed, and it needs to be in here as well. And it'd be good to have it boxed because that pump's quite noisy, and we want to muffle that as much as we can. Which we can do by putting lots of insulation and stuff around it inside a box, which would be great. Just trying to think if there's anything else here that's kind of going on. I think that's kind of it at the moment, really. From there, it's, you know, it's going to be just getting everything hooked up how I want it, and you know, I want to get my fridge hooked up real soon as well. That's the other thing I want to do. So I'm really interested to know, you know, like when I get the fridge hooked up, I've basically got a fuse box which I need to connect everything to, but I want this fridge connect because I want to know how much power it consumes. I kind of have a basic idea. I know it doesn't consume a lot, but I'd like to actually see it via real-time statistics, which I can get from a unit that I've got here for measuring the current and everything. So it'll be quite interesting to actually get this connected to the batteries and actually see what goes on. Because this is a question that everybody has, is, you know, what about if I run a fridge? Well, this is probably about as big a fridge as you want to run. I mean, it's 80 litre, and it's dual zone. So, you know, let's set it up, see what happens. I think initially I'm going to set both sides of the fridge, but probably what I'll do just as a test is I'll set one side as a freezer and one side as a fridge, and we'll see how that goes, because apparently that uses a little bit more current, and I'm still keen to see how that works out. Oh, one other thing, actually, this diesel heater. The night that I did play with this diesel heater, it was incredibly effective. Like, no smell of diesel in the van at all. But and I did have someone asking about it the other day, saying, "Oh, I'm really keen on the diesel heater to know how you go." Well, it's going to be hard for me to give you really good feedback on the diesel heater at the moment, because it's not cold anymore. It's not even cold at night anymore. And maybe we'll have a cold night, but we haven't had one yet. So probably until winter time again, we're not going to have any more cold nights. That's quite likely what will happen now. And that will be typical, you know, you install a heater and then you have nice warm nights. But anyway, I've got the heater there, but the thing is that it was really, really effective the night that I did have it going. It was really blew the heat out. It was just amazing. And the only gripe that I would have about it is just the fact that the pump itself is annoying. The pump makes a bit of a clicking sound. The way it works, it's not a typical rotary quiet type of pump. It's got like a piston in it, and a metal piston in it. It's like a metal on metal sound, and it goes click, 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 and that's what it sits there doing every time it's pumping the diesel and coming on. And if you let's say you're in a really cold environment and you needed, you know, more heat, it'll be click, 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 click. So you've got to, and it's really hard to eliminate that sound from the pump. So I reckon you probably ideally want to put your pump outside of your van. I mean, I've got it inside my van here, but it's probably better to have it outside. Maybe the only problem with having a pump outside and having your lines going outside could be if you were in a very, very cold environment, because possibly what could happen, especially if you're in a freezing environment, is the diesel could wax in the tubes, and you wouldn't be able to get the thing flowing, which would be a problem. So if you're in an extremely cold climate, I guess you've probably got to keep all the diesel lines inside the van, and anything that goes outside of the van, you'd have to lag it or something like that, or do something to stop it from waxing up or freezing. I mean, I don't realistically know whether that's a problem, but I know that diesel can wax, and maybe it could be a problem in a really freezing environment. But I'm unlikely to go to those kind of environments very often at all, if ever. So I'm more likely to be in, you know, tropical environments. So yeah, that's kind of my situation. But anyway, it is good to have this at night. You know, Brisbane gets really cold at nights in the winter. So thankfully I wasn't in the van over winter without a heater. But the nights that I did spend in here when it was cold, it was cold. So you want a heater, I reckon. I reckon it's important. Time for an update, I guess. We've been goofing around with the van over the last 2 or 3 days, and I haven't really done much. We had pretty rubbishy weather actually, so I was working inside a little bit, and just working odd hours weren't really conducive to filming anything, so I didn't really bother. But we're at a stage now, and it's a pretty nice day today, and I thought it's probably time to have an update on how things are going with everything so far, show you what I've done. I think I'll show you what I've done first, and then we'll have a talk about what I think of everything so far, because we have been out in the van a couple of times. So the first thing that we have in here is our 80 litre fridge, and we've been running this off the batteries and the solar power. And pretty happy with that, pretty happy with the size. You can set one side as a freezer and the other side as a fridge and so on. You can swap things around how you want to do it. I'm running both sides as a fridge at the moment. We find that's the most convenient thing for us, and it works well. Now this is the thing that I was working on for the last few days, was the solar power and the battery box, and so my idea was to basically get this stuff hooked up and get it working. All the basic stuff, you know, the fridge, the fuses, to be able to see how much current we're drawing off the batteries, and get the diesel heater running off this and various other things. And I wanted to be able to do that just in a temporary kind of fashion. So at the moment it's just put on this board. This is not the permanent setup, but it just allows me to test everything while I'm testing all the electrics, so that if anything's a problem, or if any of the wiring's not quite right, or if something was a problem, I could easily undo it and repair it and fix it, and then later I'll put this, I'll build something much nicer than this to hide it all. So we have our mains power coming in, fused of course. You know, you have to, my fuse I think is 38 amps or something like that, which is more than enough for my needs, but you need to work it out based on your wiring and things like that. And I don't think you'd want to put too many amps through something like this anyway. I would think 30 odd amps would be more than enough through this thing, otherwise you could be melting it maybe. But most of the load that I've got drawing off here is pretty minimal. I've just mounted a couple of charge ports. I was waiting for some to arrive actually, and they haven't arrived. They're probably not going to arrive until mid this month. They're just taking a long time because they're coming from overseas, so I ended up having to buy a slightly more expensive one. I've mounted in here again temporarily so I can charge my phone. Now the interesting thing about this is, this says it's a fast charge. Well, it doesn't actually say it's fast charge capable, but it's supposed to be 2.5 ampere hour capable. These outlets, but when I'm looking at my phone's not fast charging. Or is it? No, maybe my phone is fast charging. Sorry, no, my phone is fast charging. It's got the lightning symbol going on. But yeah, you've got to watch that. You've got to be careful with these, because some of these don't run 2.5 amps, or they don't run quite enough amperage, and then your phone won't fast charge. Your phone will just charge at standard speed, and that can mean hours and hours of charging, which would be incredibly frustrating. This also has just an ordinary cigarette lighter type output, so that I could run 12 volt appliances off that. I definitely want to have a vacuum in here at some stage, so that I can clean the van out nice and easily, quickly, rather than bringing the household vacuum in here. So I wanted to have plenty of these. So I've got about three more of these arriving. I'm just waiting for them to arrive, and they'll be placed all over various places on the van, on the bench, as a kitchen bench when I make that, and the other side of the bed, and any beside the seats, anywhere where it'll be useful to have a plug-in port, so that I'm not concerning myself with that stuff. What I did with my diesel heater is I ran my diesel heater in actually on a separate fuse, and I'm not running it through this fuse box, and the reason I'm doing that is because the diesel heater on startup, there was talk that the glow plug that you can suck up quite a lot of amperage, and I was just concerned that if it was pulling a lot of amperage, that maybe we'd have problems with the fuse box. So what I've done, it's got its own fuse on it anyway, and it just comes in and just basically hooks onto the output of the outlet here, the other thing too is that my main power actually is coming in here via an Anderson plug, and what happens is it goes, so my main power comes in, it runs through my watt meter, so I can check how much amperage or how much current I'm drawing, and how many volts I've got left in the battery, and you can kind of see everything. Let me just see if I can get a closer shot of this thing for you. Yeah, so this is the unit here, and what you can see at the bottom here is you can see, watt hours, you can see ampere hours at the top, you can see how many volts are in my battery at the moment. So at the moment, it's pretty early morning here, we've already got 14.56 volts in the battery, and we're drawing
basically 44 watts at the moment out of the batteries at the same time, obviously because the fridge compressor's just kicked in and it's just started running. And then this unit here, you know, this is going to be where I'm going to have all my cabin lights hooked up, my water pump hooked up, my stereo, and so on. Well, my basic stereo head unit anyway, which I'll show you shortly as well. And yeah, and then I've got a second lot of Anderson plugs that runs out of here down to my fridge, which is over here. So it runs down the back of there, and I've got another Anderson plug down the back of there, down the back of the fridge, and that'll be mounted, you know, on the wall or something like that, so you can plug the fridge in, plug it out. I got rid of the cigarette lighter adapter on the fridge. I just don't like them. Apparently they melt over time if they draw a bit of current. They're not very good. The Anderson plugs are a way better solution. So that's what I've done. I've cut the cigarette lighter adapter off it. I could solder it back on there if I needed to, if I needed to return this for warranty or anything like that. And then you can see my fridge control panel down here. You can see what it's doing. So at the moment the left box is at 6 degrees and the right box is at 4 degrees. It sits around those kind of temperatures most of the time. It'll go a little bit lower, a little bit higher. The fridge is awesome actually. I'm really liking it. This is the first week with a fridge in the van, and it's just been extremely useful because it's been quite hot during the days here, and so we're just able to load this thing up. You know, we've got milk, cheese, you know, chocolate of course, because you should have that to keep your ladies happy. You know, fruit and veg, all the things that you would need. And then we've got a second side here with you know, more fruit and veg and frozen berries and other stuff. Not that they're frozen at the moment because we haven't set the side up as a freezer, but you know, we've got everything we need here, some drinks and things. So the whole thing's, yeah, extremely useful and extremely efficient actually. The other thing that I have set up here is this Quell CO2 monitor. So I think it's pretty important to have one of these. These are supposed to be sort of midway set up. And the fact that we're running a diesel heater and things, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't getting carbon monoxide poisoned in here if anything went wrong with the thing. So I've got that in there. I've still got to fit a smoke detector, and I also got to fit a gas detector because I'm going to be running gas in the van as well, but that's just not done yet. This is the power control for the diesel heater, and it shows you, you know, what's going on. So at the moment in the van, it's a pretty warm day here now. It's 30 degrees inside the van with all the windows and doors open as well, that is. And it's showing me that the batteries are sitting at around 14 volts. It's a pretty awesome installation. I mean, I'm so far from being completed with the van. I've still got so much more to do, so much more work to do here, but overall I'm just really happy with the whole thing. I'm really happy with the way it's working, with the way the electrics are going. The electrics has been really interesting actually, because I have a 300 watt solar panel on my roof, and I ran, as you can see sort of in one of the earlier videos, I've run some really big fat cable down from my solar panels, and then, you know, nice thick 6mm cable also to my batteries. So, and then I have 6mm cable coming back to my fuse box here. So, and I did that because I wanted to have minimal loss in my system, and I also bought a DC to DC converter for the van, so that if I was in a situation where solar panel I was, you know, drawing more current than what I could use, and if I was drawing too much current and the solar couldn't keep up with the power that I was using, then I'd have to look at either adding more batteries or having the DC to DC converter working, so that when the van's running, it's charging. So you drive to your location, and while you're driving, it's charging. And if your battery's got really low in an emergency, you could potentially drive your vehicle and charge your batteries. But it hasn't been an issue at all actually. The solar panel, I find that like overnight we might run the battery down to 12.7 volts. I think 12.5 was the lowest we got, and that was on the very first day that we ran it, and we'd only had the solar on for a couple of hours that day, and I'd only had the batteries on a trickle charger. And typically I'm not getting below about 12.6, 12.7 volts overnight, running my diesel heater for some of the night, and obviously running the fridge full time, and lights and other things that I've got in here. And that's, yeah, it's been pretty awesome. And I find that by about 9 o'clock in the morning, you know, even before 9 o'clock in the morning, the battery's already fully charged. I don't know what time the sun comes up here. It probably comes up around, it's probably coming up around sort of 5:30, 6 in the morning or something like that. But yeah, but certainly by, you know, 8 o'clock in the morning, sometimes I've got up and I've checked the battery and checked the charge controller to see what's going on, and it's charged, you know, like fully charged already. So yeah, so this was something that I was concerned about. I was concerned, you know, as you are, I guess most people when you're setting this kind of stuff up, is how good is it going to be? Is the solar going to be enough? Are my batteries going to be enough? Am I going to be able to run everything I want to run? And often when you're working out, like I sat down and kind of worked things out on paper and was working out how much current I might need, and it was looking like I might need more batteries than what I've got if I wanted to run everything. So I kind of scaled some of my plans back, like with the stereo, for example. I was thinking to run a separate amp, and I may still do that. I think I've probably still got enough power to do it, but what I decided to do in the end was to go with a sort of half decent head unit. Could do a lot of things. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to install the head unit, speakers, the DVD player, and I'm going to have a second screen. So I'm going to install the portable DVD player so the kids can watch DVDs as we're driving. That's going to run back to a second screen which can be turned on if we're sitting in bed and we want to watch the same DVD from bed on a much bigger screen. And all the sound will be run through the head unit and through 4 sets of speakers in this van, which I'll show you that setup shortly because I've sort of got that all set up on a test bed. And I'm thinking I might like to run a small sub, and I might run a second amplifier, maybe, but at this stage I want to see first what it's like to run with just the head unit, and I think it's probably actually going to be good enough. I mean, the sound's obviously not going to be as good as my sound system in the house, but I think it'll be reasonable. I think it'll be quite reasonable. So what I'll do is I'll see if I can show you some of the solar statistics. I had my solar charge controller actually set up, hooked up to my batteries before I had my solar panel hooked up for a number of days. So when you go through the first couple of days of statistics, it doesn't really show you any data because the solar panel wasn't hooked up. So the only thing we were doing was consuming power from the battery via the charge controller, because it uses about 0.3 of an amp or something like that just to run. But I'm happy with the setup. I'm really happy with the setup so far. So, the only other thing that I would say to you, there's a couple of things I should talk about. So one of them is the Bluetooth module for the to check everything. The Bluetooth module doesn't have much range on this Renogy system. Maybe it's the way I've got mine set up. I've got it set fairly high in the van. I would have thought the range would have been better, but I find that, you know, once if I'm standing close to the van within probably 5 or 6 meters of the van, it's line of sight with no walls in between us, I can connect to it. But if I'm inside the house, there's no way I can connect to it. I just can't. With my phone and my Bluetooth and my phone, normally, you know, like my car sound system and other things, and my Galaxy Bud headphones and stuff like that, I can connect to that stuff. You know, I can have my phone inside the house and I can walk outside of the house, and the Bluetooth still works. So I'm a bit surprised that this Renogy system is not very good. Maybe they've done that deliberately, I'm not sure, but in some ways it's a little bit disappointing because I would have liked to have been in the house and been able to check things. So yeah, the Renogy thing, it's a little bit disappointing. I mean, it's not a huge deal because at the end of the day, when I'm sitting inside the van, that's the main time that I want to be able to check the batteries. But it would have been nice to be able to check the batteries also from the house, which I obviously can't do. But it's looking at the moment like it's not going to be an issue anyway, because the battery system seems to be holding up quite well. The diesel heater, that's the other thing we should talk about. So the diesel heater, last night was the first time we've really used the diesel heater. I was in the van actually a couple of nights ago installing all the electrics and stuff in the van quite late at night. It was quite cold and I used the diesel heater, and that was the first time I'd used it since I've really done the proper install. And I had it going for probably 2 hours, and it was awesome, like really awesome. And the only downside I would say to the diesel heater is that the pump is noisy, and people do talk about this. So really you have a couple of solutions, and I have spoken about it a couple of times. You know, you can put your pump outside, but if you're going to a really cold climate, that could be a problem. I'm going to keep mine inside, and I'm going to box it, and I'm going to soundproof the box, and I think that will be enough. I think I can deaden it down enough. It'll still be a dull kind of knock going on in the background, but it would be very minor compared to what it is at the moment, because it's just sitting beside the tank at the moment out in the open. As far as functionality goes with the diesel heater in the environment that we're in, I mean, it's hard for me to comment in a really cold environment because I'm not in a really cold environment. And even at night here, I mean, you guys will probably think we're kind of girly blouse here because, you know, it gets to like 17 degrees at night and we start to think it's cold, but it's because, you know, during the day you got to remember it's like 30 plus degrees most of the time, unless you're kind of midwinter, and now we're getting up into the 30s kind of every day pretty much. It's certainly high 20s. So when it gets down to 17, you know, once you go below 5 degrees what you're used to, you start to feel cold. Certainly if you're 10 degrees below what you're used to, it's going to feel cold. So 17 degrees to us at night feels cold. Wouldn't feel cold if we're living in New Zealand, but it feels cold here because we're been here for more than a year and we're used to it and we're acclimatised to that. So, you know, it got down to 17, I think 17 degrees inside the van last night, and there was a couple of times we turned the diesel heater on and we had it running. But because we're already at 17 degrees and the diesel heater, the way it operates is it's basically a heat exchanger, and it's got a fire going, a diesel fire going inside it, and it's using like a heat exchange unit with fins, and it's running cold air across the top of those on the outside, and it's heating the cold air that's inside the van, or the cool air that's inside the van. Well, that fire inside of that diesel heater never stops. It's going the whole time. So when you're regulating the temperature inside the van, or the way the diesel heater is regulating the temperature is one of two ways. It's the amount of fuel that it's putting into it. So when the van's really cold and you first start it up, it's ramping up, and you can hear that pump going knock, 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 and it's pumping lots of diesel into there to really get the heat up really quickly. But once the heat is up to a set level, then what it does is it backs the pump right off to a much lower rate, and it's knocking maybe, I don't know, 3 times a second. So it's like knock, 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 that kind of pace, and you can hear the whole thing slows right down. But the other thing that it does is it also the fan that's blowing the air over those fins, that also slows right down and it backs itself right off as well. So but the point is that you've still got the air flowing, and even though you've reached the temperature perhaps that you desire, would be kind of like turning your car heater on without your air conditioning, and you could put that right down right low, but unless you're using it in conjunction with an air conditioner, you wouldn't really have true climate control. And that's what these diesel heaters are like. You don't really have true climate control unless you're in quite a cold environment. So if we were in an environment, say for example, where it was approaching freezing outside, or it was maybe 5 degrees outside or 4 degrees, it'd be perfect, it'd be fine. You wouldn't ever need to turn it off. You could probably just leave it going all night. But because we're in this environment where it's slightly warmer, especially at this season, you know, in spring, and probably also in autumn it would be the same, we can't really leave the diesel heater going all night because it just gets too hot. So I reckon we could fix that with ventilation. So we haven't got the vent installed, we haven't got a Dometic vent in our roof yet. Once we have the Dometic vent in the roof, I think what I'd probably do if it got to that sort of temperature where I didn't want to be turning the thing on off, I think I'd just prop the roof vent slightly open so there was a little bit of airflow going, and I reckon that would be perfect. But without ventilation in your van, without having a window open or something, it would get too hot. It would definitely get too hot in this environment at that temperature. It's going to be interesting to see what it's like in wintertime, and whether when it's much colder, whether it's better. But people rave about them, so I have to assume that people from colder climates know what they're talking about, that are running them, and they all rave about them and say they're great, and they leave them going all night and they don't have a problem even in a van our size. Remember, our van too it's a long wheelbase, medium top, it's not high top. So with a diesel heater, the more space you're heating, the better the situation will be. So if you had a Toyota Coaster minibus or a high top extra long wheelbase van or something like that, you could probably leave your heater going all night, I reckon, because you've just got that little bit more space to heat. But our vans, we've got a little bit of insulation and stuff in here already, so it does get pretty warm. So that's about all I can say really about that diesel heater side of things and the electrical side of things so far, in my experience so far. So I'm liking the setup so far. The only thing I don't like is where my fuse box is. It's in a pretty rubbishy place, right down by the floor. You can't look at it easily. It definitely needs to be higher, but because I haven't lined the walls, I hadn't settled on a final place to put it. But I will definitely be moving it up to eye level, and I would recommend that when you put one in, have it at eye level, have your ammeter and everything all at eye level, so you can just glance at it really easily. You don't want to be mucking around trying to bend down on your knees to get at fuses and things. It's a pain in the neck. And having it low like this, just because it was convenient, it's definitely highlighted that it's not at all convenient to have it that way at all. Convenience is everything in a van, everything. You got to think about everything. You got to think, is it going to be convenient? Because the chances are, if you've got something in your van and it's not convenient to use, you won't use it. It's just that simple. You'll go camping and you won't use it. You'll be like, I can't be bothered, I'm too tired, it's too much hassle, I can't be bothered setting that up. And it'll have to be an emergency for you to set it up and use it if it's inconvenient. So now what I'll do is I'll show you the stereo setup that I'm going to install, and I'm going to get onto that today and hopefully get it all installed. So unfortunately, every time I come in here, the washing machine's going. It seems to go non-stop in our house. I guess it's part of having kids, but it's always making a racket in the background every time I want to film something. Always on a spin cycle. So what I've got here is Polk audio speakers. These are my speakers. These are in-ceiling speakers. They're not car speakers, but they are a really decent sounding speaker. They're 100 watts RMS, so they will handle a decent amount of power. But most importantly, they'll sound really nice once they're actually installed with some sort of backing behind them. And I've got a Jam-O speaker here which I use just as a comparison, just to see what it would sound like with something with a backing on it. And then I've got this came with my van, so I thought I'll repurpose it and reuse it since it still runs. So this is a 10.2 inch screen with DVD, and it's got all kinds of inputs and outputs, so you can input video into this. You can take your sound out of it via RCA plugs, which are they're hidden away here somewhere. Oh, there they are. So these RCA, so you have your audio feed out, plus you've got an extra video feed which you can feed to an additional monitor, which is what I'm going to do. I forget what that plug was for, but it was, I think that was an extra earth or something like that. But anyway, I've got all the wiring diagram for this stuff, so I can soon figure out what all those things are. Has a remote control. It was designed to work with the interior lights and things like that, and I'm not going to bother to hook that stuff up because I don't really care about that. I just care about keeping my kids amused in the background, and it's designed obviously to mount upside down. The only thing I would say about that is it's a little bit noisy, so the noise does tend to come through into the stereo, which is not really ideal, but for what it's going to do, it's okay. And then what I have is a Sony DSX GS80, and this is supposed to be 100 watts by 4 max power, so it's not RMS power, which does make a difference. You can connect 2 phones or 2 devices by Bluetooth, so I have my phone connected to this so I can stream from my phone directly to this. I'm just trying to think of the other things that are kind of important about it. Probably the pre-outs is the only other thing that's really important to know about this, is that it has the pre-outs and it also has a remote control, which is here, so you can sit on your bed and control the thing, which is kind of important. And it has this auxiliary input, so the auxiliary input would be much nicer if it was on the back, but this thing's like $200, so I guess I couldn't get everything I wanted for inside of that kind of budget and within the kind of range that I had. So if you spent more money, you could obviously buy something better, but that's the budget that I had, and I've already blown my budget in so many areas on my van, so this is another area I didn't want to blow more budget. But yeah, just you can just run any kind of input into this. So I'm running at the moment, that's from the DVD player, but I could run a tablet into this or whatever I wanted into that. But I wouldn't run the tablet into that. I'd Bluetooth it actually. So so if I'm not playing a DVD and I want to play something from YouTube, obviously I'd use my tablet, and I'll make a mounting system for the tablet inside the van as well, so I don't necessarily have to play a DVD, but it's just convenient to play a DVD because it'll be hooked up to the system, permanently charging, or permanently charged, or permanently running, I should say, so you don't have to worry about, like with an iPad, it's like every 2 hours you've got to worry about your battery and where your battery level's at and things like that. I won't have to worry about any of that with this. And I've tested this whole setup on the bench here, and it's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. It's pretty reasonable. So the next thing to do is to get it into van and see what it's like actually and how it performs in the van. And try and get everything hooked up. I've got to look for another monitor, and I'm also going to have to look for a DC to DC converter for the monitor, because the monitor runs at 17 volts and you've got to regulate the voltage to 17 volts. So, but there are converters that can do that, and I'll figure those out, and I'll be able to tell you about those as well and how they work. Yeah, so I guess really that's about it. That's about as far as I've got with this thing so far. I wanted to sort of let you guys know what it was like, from my experience so far, living with it for a week. I mean, a week's not really long enough to evaluate it properly, but it does give you an idea, and maybe it'll help some of you with your builds. Anyway, I'll carry on and we'll talk again soon.
Well, the birds are going mental because it's like their nesting season, and they're like dive bombing people today. It's the first time I've seen them do it, but they were doing it. There you go. How crazy is that?
No doubt they'd gang up. Oh man, I don't know whether their chicks have hatched or not, but they, like today, they were calm as, and now they're like really angry.